Big thank you to James and the Penzance team here who've set the meeting up tonight. It's a huge boost when you come into a room that's packed with people. I'm going to say that we know things are beginning to move now, things are beginning to happen, but it's just great to see so many people. We are not going to rush off afterwards, so if you want to talk and ask questions, we're happy to do that. I'd also like to say that it's not just me, because I get to stand out in front and do the talking. Mike talks as well. But in our Plymouth office, there's a lot of work that goes on. Mike Robinson, who's here at the front with me, is doing the overwhelming lion's share of producing the paper at the moment. So he's really taken over most of putting the paper together. And that's allowed me to concentrate on some other things. And then we've brought up Carol and Kate and Sheila, three ladies who we couldn't function without. So don't forget, it isn't just me, it's a whole team of people. And we've recently had some new people get involved with us. Lou and Dylan, who are standing over at the side. And this is going to enable us to start producing more videos. And we are very, very close now to getting what will be a fairly basic but a news programme up on Edge TV and probably Paradigm Shift TV. So if you know those two Sky channels, we're very close to being able to get up our own news programmes. So a huge change in a short space of time. The other thing I'd like to say is there's a lady in this room who started my journey. She won't like it if I mention her, so she can sit quietly, but I can tell you her name is Jackie. And many years ago, another friend of mine who was living down in Cornwall, in Truro, said to me, out of the blue one morning, what was I doing? And I said, I got a report to write. And he said, well, I'd like you to come down into Cornwall. And I said, well, I can't. And he said, when can you? And I said, tomorrow. And he said, well, okay. And I said, why am I coming to Cornwall? He said, I want you to meet a lady. And he wouldn't tell me any more. And the next day, on his word, I got in my car and I drove down to Cornwall and I met a lady called Jackie. And we had a very interesting conversation where initially I wasn't too sure why she wanted to meet me. And I got her to talk and she told me about setting up a project in Cornwall which was called the Reminiscence Project. And her idea was to get young children together with older people who'd been bakers or fishermen or worked on the land. And she set the project up. It was very successful. The children liked it, the older people liked it, and the teachers liked it. And then all of a sudden some people came along and said, could they help her? And to cut a long story short, the people started to take over Jackie's project and destroy it. And when she told me this story, I said, well, I had a project in Plymouth called the Beagle Project, where we were trying to give people skills training. And we had people trying to destroy that project as well. And then a very strange conversation took place. And Jackie eventually said to me, well, you know what your job is? And remember, this is a lady I'd never met before. Remember what your job is, Brian, is to get out around the country and explain to people what is going on. And so about a month later, I booked a WI hall in the village where I lived. 17 people turned up. And I gave a talk, and at 11:30 I couldn't get rid of most of them. And that was the start of it. So if you want to know where it started for me, it was in Cornwall. And I think, and I'm not just saying it because I'm here in Penzance and I've got a Cornish audience, but there's something very special about Cornwall. And there's something very special about the people in Cornwall. And I'm going to tell you that I've also been in South Wales. And there's something very special about the people in Wales as well. Now, I'm going to let you think what it is. But if I said to you, and I was told not to mention this subject tonight, if I say to you, if you check your history books, you'll find that Cornwall was originally called West Wales. And it's something to do with who you are and what that actually means. And I'll just finish. It's something very special. Okay, let's see whether the equipment works. So I always put this slide up because I get a bit of kudos sometimes from saying that I've been out there doing the job, as it were, although the time is getting further and further away. But the key bit is I wasn't a submariner. I have to say that. Otherwise, the people in the submarines get really stroppy, because if you're a submariner, you're fairly special. You smell a bit, but you're a special person. And I was a surface ship officer, but we were out in the Atlantic and the Norwegian Sea tracking the Russian ballistic missile submarines and the nuclear submarines. And the aim of the game was trying to stop them before they could take out our own submarines. So I can talk about that. Maybe I should do a talk on that subject. But the key bit was that because of the work I was doing, I was not only military trained, but I was also getting a bit of military intelligence training. And that meant that it wasn't just a case of being at sea. You're also looking at what was happening in the world, who was manoeuvring, what the equipment was, what the tactics were. And this brings me to the key thing, that when most people think of warfare, they think about what they see on TV, which is all the guns and bullets and missiles. But actually there's a whole raft of other warfare, and much of it is to do with trying to get the enemy to give in before you actually have to fire anything, and that's psychological. And my story really starts with starting to see things happening around me in UK, in the political scene, and that told me that there was something very strange at work. So I've done the job at sea. I did command one of the offshore protection vessels, and that was the time I watched the fishing fleet being destroyed. And I've said there's a couple of talks. One dark, stormy night in the Firth of Forth, I had the mispleasure to have to confiscate the fishing nets of a Scottish fisherman. It was quite a small fishing boat, and he said to me in fairly right language, "Do you realise I've got a family to feed and you are destroying my livelihood?" And I stood there on a very wet, cold and rocking fishing boat, and I knew what the man was saying to me was absolutely true. And the rules and regulations that I was imposing on that British fisherman were clearly not being imposed on the other European fishermen, on the Dutch or the Spanish or the French or the Germans. And I later saw, and I'll mention in the talk, I later saw British fishing boats being cut up, while our money was being cycled through the European Union to pay for brand new fishing boats for the Dutch, Germans and Spanish. And that was pretty tough. And it was one of the things that caused me to think about what I was doing. There were some other changes as well, and that's why I left the Navy. But I think I can say with some confidence that the naval and military training that I had put me in good stead for looking at what I am looking at the moment and also analysing. Well, here we are. Here's the UK column, and this is the front page from the latest issue. I hope, can you see the screen okay at the back? Is it big enough?
Yeah, we see that right.
Okay. So this is a Mike Robinson masterpiece, and the subject, as you can see, is the Leveson inquiry. And we decided to go front page on this at the moment because the other newspapers, they are reporting it a little bit. Some of the mainstream media is supporting it. But in the background, a group of people are basically deciding if the government is going to start controlling the press and the media. And we've written quite a considerable article in the newspaper saying that we believe that this is common purpose starting to manoeuvre to take over. You all right? Okay. Just watch the lead. Yeah, so we wanted to bring this straight to people's attention and say, keep watching what's happened in the background with Mr. Leveson. And this gentleman here is David Bell from Common Purpose. He's been manoeuvring for his own organisation, the Media Standards Trust, effectively to take over from the Press Complaints Commission. If this man's organisation takes over from the Press Complaints Commission, effectively Common Purpose will be running and controlling the press and the media. This is Shami Chakrabarti, Chief Executive from Liberty. I'll just remind you that when Liberty was the National Council for Civil Liberties, they were promoting that pornographic pictures of children should be acceptable, and the onus should be on parents to prove that their children suffered harm from having those pornographic photos taken. This is also the lady who sat on the board of the London School of Economics, happily sucking in money from the Gaddafi regime. She's common purpose graduate and a senior common purpose person, and I think together with this man Leveson, they're a very dangerous combination. So dig into the media, do your own research. All is not as it seems. You won't be able to read this, but this was the little leaflet that we put out to see whether we could attract people in the talk. How many of you actually got a State of the Nation leaflet? Is that why you're here? So quite a few. Okay, that's good. If you give, myself or James a bit of feedback, we'd like to know whether we hit the spot or not. So I don't know how you all got here, but well done anyway. Now, bearing in mind, I never know whether we've got an audience of people who know or people who are learning. And also, when the videos go out, we have to try and make sure that for audiences who just watch the video, they can see exactly where we're coming from. And also, I'm trying some different things. I've got new information, but you're always trying to find new ways of putting it across. So I thought I'd start off early with saying, do we know about these people? How many of you know about the Bilderbergers? All right, excellent. Okay, those who don't, I'm going to say to you, perhaps after this evening, you'll actually get onto the internet, Google Bilderbergers, and you'll find out about an organisation. I'm going to mention them in a minute. Trilateral Commission, what about the Trilats? Maybe not quite so many people. They're still important, very important, because the Trilateral Commission are working on this plan to drive the world into 3 main regions. This is real, I'm not making it up. You can go on the internet and see the documentation, and what they want is Canada, North America and South America forced into one block. And so there's breaking down of the border controls in the States. There's a lot of cross-migration, and the aim is that it's going to become one blob. Europe, the European Union isn't the European Union we see at the moment, because the fully fledged project is for the European Union to include Africa and the Soviet Union. And that's not a slip of the tongue, because Russia, although I'm going to speak quite highly of some of the things going on in Russia, there's still a political undertone that's quite dangerous to us. And the rest of the world goes into the Asia-Pacific region, where the powerhouse is now coming with China and India. And the one world government that's driving this lot wants to control the world by forcing it into those 3 regions. There will not be nation-state countries. There will only be regional areas. And if you don't know it already, even America is being broken down into regions. So the American states are being paralleled at the moment with regional identity, and the aim is that everybody will live in a region. Well, you will live in a super city in a region. And what I probably should have put on there is Agenda 21. How many of you know what Agenda 21 really is? Okay, that's interesting, because not so many hands have gone up. But Agenda 21 is a key part of the drive for a one world government. It is not about saving the planet. It is not about saving the planet. It is about helping the drive to a one world government. And there's overwhelming documentation, if you go looking for it, which says that. So this is a bit of background on the Bilderberg group. So if you trace it through, here's Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who was a member of the Nazi Party. He was a member of the SS, and he was the first chairman of the Bilderberg movement in the early 50s, 1954. And since then, this club for internationalists and very, very powerful corporate people has met every year in secret, information does get leaked out, but these are the people that are putting together the plans for a one world government. I'm not going to talk about them in detail tonight because I've got other things to talk about, but my challenge to you is if you don't believe what I'm saying, you go and check it and research them yourself. It's easy to show. This was their meeting in Switzerland last year. Here's George Osborne. He's having a little party with a bit of coke and stuff. Mandy Mandelson. And Rory Stewart, he's a man to watch. He's up in Cumbria. He's a young man who's popped out of Oxford University, and already he's mixing with the Bilderbergers, so he's destined for high places. But the interesting thing is that here is essentially a right-wing organisation. And when you look at the British politicians involved, we've got a Tory, and we've got a Labour, and we've got a Tory, and we've got civil servants, effectively. Now, I can't get all the evidence into one talk, but I've shown at other talks letters showing that Ed Balls attends Bilderberg meetings. We know that other politicians do. This young man's been doing it. When you ask him why did he attend it, what was discussed, he doesn't want to tell us. And that's because there is an agenda going on. The government is desperate to keep away from us. So this is the heart of it, change. If you look at newspapers or magazines or you watch the television, change. We need change. The movement for change. Elections fought on change. We need change. But they never, ever tell you what the change is. They never say we need to change from this state to that to this new state. They only push change. And the change agenda is the danger. And that's really going to be the focus of my talk tonight. So I'll ask you the questions. Have you noticed that things have changed in Cornwall? Anybody tell me how? Healthcare. What would you say about healthcare? Closing down wards in hospitals. Yeah, we've got a unitary authority. Anything else? Yeah, they've got rid of the word county. Okay. Yeah, traffic wardens, more black, more aggressive, and they've got greater powers. So that's happening in Cornwall, and I can tell you that if you go across the UK now, we're lucky because we do quite a bit of travelling. You go into the Midlands, you go into Wales, you go down in the southeast, and if you go through inner city areas, you are seeing derelict areas. Pubs closing, pub close. Why are the pubs closing? Can anybody tell me? Well, there's the smoking ban, but also the supermarkets, of course, are allowed to sell desperately cheap alcohol. Absolutely. You can get in a pub and you can talk and you can swap information. And that's where the real truth goes round in the pubs. Of course, you get the TV screens in and everybody's glued to the football. That's where the intelligence goes out. Sorry if anybody's keen on football. But the pubs are being shut down in their tens of thousands because that's where we, the British, traditionally meet.
This is right-wing racist interpretation of some truths.
Listen, I want to hear Brian Gerrish, not you. Now,
Well,
Yes, I know. Piss off.
Excuse me, have I said anything racist?
Sammy Party is somehow an evil person. I mean,
What I said was that.
What's this about black?
What I said was.
What's this about black traffic rules?
In black uniforms. Black uniforms.
They're taking over police power, that's what they're doing. You're going to be auxiliary policemen, that's what they're going to end up in.
It's a shame he won't stay because I've got a slide specially for him. I find his remarks particularly offensive because I have black members of my own family now who are treated like any other part of the family. And also we have in our circle of friends many other people from other countries, including Muslims. But the gentleman has demonstrated quite admirably that he is in a mindset that's a tunnel. He is repeating what he's been programmed to hear. So I'm going to say it's unfortunate that he's not staying, but he's a victim. And I've got a little clip of film in a moment which shows you where it goes to. So we're seeing the change in UK. So I asked the question, do you feel comfortable with the country at the moment? No. You can sense something, can't you? It's an unease. People are not happy. My father's 92, going to be 93 this year. And one of the things he said to me a couple of years ago was, Brian, do you think people have changed? And I said, well, actually, I don't think they've changed. I think they have been changed. And what he started to talk about was the fact that even in areas in his day where people were genuinely poor, he said you'd walk or cycle to work in the morning and people were whistling. And if you stopped in a pub, people were laughing and joking. And it's amazing, you can go in places now, you can go in some pubs and everybody's just sat there in silence. So it's deeper than just trouble in politics. There's a sort of unease coming. It's something oppressive. And this is deliberate and it's being engineered. Watch. The man they're pulling out of the car is 73 years old. Basically, that is the police in action. In my opinion, those officers should be in prison. Right? Actually, they're victims. They are acting in a very cold, brutal, thuggish way, in my opinion, not because they're bad people, but because of what's been done to them in their training. And the gentleman who's left, we'll just call him the gentleman who's gone, that anger based on nothing, he came because he wanted to make a scene and shout, but he's a victim because he's being controlled to react in that way. He doesn't understand that. These policemen just wanted to stop this car. This is not an armed gun dealer. This is not a thug. This is a 73-year-old man. I can't remember what his crime was. Oh, he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. Okay. Now, we're meeting more and more people around the country who are quite horrified at their experiences with the police. And what they say is really weird sometimes is perhaps if there's two policemen, one is fine, and the other one, wow, what's the matter with you? Aggression, real aggression. And this aggression is being created. There's another little film clip, hopefully.
Honestly, I'm afraid at this point it is you guys who are the criminals. You might not think it, you might not believe it, but you are acting criminally. I know you're just trying to earn money to live.
No, I do it for the love of it. I love the Queen. Just check the notes.
Yeah, you're going against the Queen right now.
No. She's told me to do this. That's what I do the job. That's why when I used to go, when I was in the forces and go and kill people, the Queen told me to.
Right, the Queen
No, I do it for the love of it. I love the Queen. Just check the notes.
Yeah, you're going against the Queen right now.
No. She's told me to do this. That's what I do the job. That's why when I used to go, when I was in the forces and go and kill people, the Queen told me to.
So he's a police officer because he used to be in the forces and the Queen told him to go and kill people. There could be a bit of truth in that, which we can discuss, but what we know is what this man is saying at the moment is wrong. So what is he about? What's he doing? How many of you have ever been to London and got close to Westminster and seen all the police with their machine guns? Have you seen them? You've been close to them, talked to them? You can talk to some really nice blokes. You get along a bit and you talk to them. There's nothing there. Glazed eyes, aggression. They look at you as though you're a piece of dirt. All right? We've now got to the state in Britain that we've got police, not just a sidearm, a handgun, but they're now there with automatic weapons. And the thing I find frightening about police with guns is they think they're trained. And that's a compliment to the army, actually, because I think you've got to be in the army to be properly trained in weapons. And I see police officers who think they're acting the Starsky and Hutch role. Now, it's not their fault. It's being done in the training. But those 2 video clips only came into the office this morning, and we thought they were so incredible, we'd put them up. This is the state of policing in UK. And people who've been taken into police stations and given a pretty hard time, but one guy, an ex-military guy, said after they logged him in, he was taken down 2 floors where there were more cells, and the people handling the prisoners on that underground floor were all dressed in black. They had no numbers or insignia or badges or names. They were all black. That would have upset the man. Black uniforms. Black uniforms. This is political correctness at work. It's great, isn't it? So who were these individuals? They weren't even police. They were from Group 4 security. They were private security contractors working in the police stations. This is very, very dangerous. So what's going on in the world? Let's just have a quick run through what's happening in the news at the moment. And I had to put this one in. Do you remember what the papers did? We had British national newspapers showing the bleeding, rotten body of Gaddafi on the front page. And somebody likened it to a form of pornography. Now, I think what was going on was something rather different. I think they were putting a message out, you cross us, and this is what happens to you. And I thought this photograph is just wonderful, isn't it? Because here he is, Obama, that everybody liked. Everybody liked. I'll just say he's in a blue tie, in case there's somebody else here going to get upset with me. So he's shaking this man's hand, and they knew perfectly well when the regime change was required, they were going to murder him. And Britain participated in the murder of this head of a foreign country. We might not have agreed with his politics or the way he ran his country. He was not brought to justice. He was murdered. And we need to be aware of it, and we know who was involved. Here's another absolute hypocrite. And of course, all the time we're seeing that these political leaders are acting across the board. It's across party politics, it's across national politics. So isn't it ironic that ever since Tony Blair has been in charge in peace in the Middle East, we've seen nothing but war and trouble all around the rim of the Mediterranean. And this is really what they are doing. It's regime change. If you are not a head of state that's prepared to bow down to who's really got the power, which is the international banking elite, they are the ones who control the armed forces, whether it's in America or this country. But if you don't agree with us and you're not going to bow down to what we want, we're going to remove you as a head of state. And it makes me wince when I watch TV and Assad, this gentleman, is saying on TV, we have foreign agitators at work inside Syria, and the BBC is mocking and laughing, and in fact I believe this man is absolutely telling the truth. And I believe that the British government is fully implicated into stirring up trouble inside Syria so that there can be an excuse to invade and topple the regime. What is particularly bad about Britain is that, of course, with great respect, I'm allowed to say it, we don't really have powerful armed forces anymore. They're all being cut to the bone. So when Mr. Cameron or William Hague starts rattling the sabre, they're not actually talking about using British armed forces, they're talking about using American ones. And one of the things that we've discussed in the Plymouth office recently is you can almost now begin to smell that it's the City of London and British politics which is driving what the American agenda does. It's subtle, you've got to look at it, you've got to read stuff in the paper, but if you ask me what I believe, I am now becoming convinced that we are seeing the top of the pyramid, which is the banksters. They're the people really pulling the strings. On the British side of the pond, they're the ones controlling what America is doing. And here's another lovely man, Mr. Liam Fox. So he was swanning around the country with his best man, Werrity. What were they doing? International arms deals. And when he was finally outed and had to actually stand down from his job, he gave a speech to Westminster as though he was getting one of the BAFTA awards. And they all applauded, when in fact this man has been one of the biggest traitors next to Cameron we've seen in some years, because he was going around the country working with all sorts of groups who clearly don't have this nation's best interests at heart. And I thought this was a pretty symbolic picture, because here he is in his smart suit, but what he's really doing is killing people. There's one thing to be on the front line fighting a proper enemy, in my opinion. There's another thing to be on the in your suit arranging for civilians to be bombed and massacred in countries overseas. There was no proper debate in Parliament before we, with other nations, attacked Libya. We, the British, are now caught up in international terrorism. We are creating the problem. And I find it sickening as an ex-forces person to know that British forces are being used for this agenda. What's heartening is more and more and more of the troops, particularly the boys coming back from Afghanistan, have worked out what they're there for, which is to protect the opium crops. Check the figures. You'll find ever since American and British forces have been into Afghanistan, opium production has increased, and the troops themselves will tell you that they're not allowed to destroy poppy crops. Extraordinary, isn't it? So here's the next one, Iran. And who have we got standing up and shouting and warmongering? And Iran is the problem. In fact, Mike did a very good skit on the back of the latest UK column. It's called the Cabbage Patch column, because we think that David Cameron looks like a Cabbage Patch doll. It's true. But every opportunity, Iran is the problem. Nuclear weapons, Iran. International terrorism, Iran. Iran, Iran, Iran. And why? Because Iran at the moment is not under the control of the international banking regime, and Iran is also controlling huge amounts of oil, which it can deal straight through to the Russians. And Iran is not kowtowing to the international dollar market in oil. But there's another factor, and that is that if you follow the regime change that's gone around the rim of the Mediterranean, with Egypt and Libya, Syria coming, Iran is the other set that the world government needs in order to really clamp down and build this European African superstate. So they're gunning for this man. I've forgotten this lady's name, but she suddenly popped out of nowhere from Britain. Baroness Ashdown, is it? Ashdown? If you look at her qualifications, she doesn't know anything about anything, and now she's got a really top job to do with European security, and she can spout her mouth off about Iran. These are puppets, and at the moment we have a huge BBC propaganda machine that is trying to tell us that Iran is such a big problem. We need to... I wonder what that was for a moment. That's all right. That they want to stir up trouble. So my prediction is you're going to see more and more of the BBC constantly pumping the danger of Iran, and you're going to see more and more intimidation, saber-rattling, poking with a stick by British forces and, well, principally American armed forces. Now, we've got to get a step beyond politics, because we've got to talk money. And here's a picture of Mr. George Soros. So I'm going to ask, how many of you know who he is? A few do. Well, I'm going to say to the people here in the room, please will you all go away and research this man, because this is one of the mysterious men who control billions, trillions of dollars. They're not just a banker, these are super bankers controlling more money than most nations' GDPs. He is the man who boasted that when he was working for the Nazis in the Second World War, he was very happy to take property from Jewish people before they went off to the camps. He said that on television, so he doesn't appear to be squeamish. If you go and look at his website, you can see that he's talking about putting $1.9 billion into programs of change around the world. And if you look at many charities, foundations, trusts, think tanks, and those sorts of bodies, you will find that, surprise, surprise, they come back to people like Mr. George Soros. Isn't it interesting that the Archbishop of Canterbury recently was printed in the Telegraph saying that he thought really people should listen to Mr. Soros because he'd got some good plans for solving the world monetary problems. See, the Archbishop of Canterbury said that. Anybody who's got a bit of basic biblical work behind them will know there was a story about overturning the tables of the money lenders, but the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't seem to know that story. So we've got all sorts of things unfolding at the moment, and we get glimpses of it on TV, but not a lot, not on mainstream news, because most of that's dross. But if you're listening or watching other channels, they are talking about Greece, and Greece is now in one hell of a mess. And a lot of people are saying that if we're going to see the start of real violence in Europe, it is actually going to happen in Greece. And I think there's some truth in that. And don't forget, we've had both Angela Merkel, German Chancellor, and also some of the international bankers also saying that they believe that we could see war in Europe inside 10 years. That's not my words, those are words coming out of politicians in Europe. So we're getting into some quite serious times. But if we're nearer home, these are the things that sort of trigger us to see what we're looking at. Drive around the country and you can drive through areas where the houses are boarded up. And it's not just a question that nobody's living in those houses, it's also the fact those communities have gone. The people who were there working maybe at a local factory aren't there anymore, so there's no community. And the decay brings all sorts of problems with it. This is a topical one maybe. Anybody from Newquay? Sorry, you'll probably hate me for that. But in most of the big towns now, there's a big problem with drink, with young people. Big problem. I'm going to say we've all been there at one time, and we've all had too much to drink. But we're now starting to see something happen, which is it's a routine. And it's not just blokes getting a bit pissed and falling over in the street. We're now starting to see girls in a hell of a state. It's not a nice thing for me to say, but I realised how bad it was the first time I saw a woman urinating in the street in Newcastle. And that was while I was actually still serving in the Navy. And it just made me think a bit. This is a topic which I'm delighted because I'm getting more and more people who are starting to ask me questions about it. But if you look around the country, there are more and more pieces of artwork which you can look at them and say it's rubbish, or you look at it and say it's disturbing. This is up near St Helens. That's a child's bike down there, so that's a person. So a person's that height. This is a pretty tall piece of sculpture. And the locals call it the Willy, and they say that if you actually walk around it and look at it, it is a phallus. And the artist is proud to boast that the young girl's face that he's used, I think, was 7. She was 7 or 9 years old. Now, if you watch and you look, if you drive down the M5, what do you see on the Somerset levels? You see a wicker man, the angel of the north. And if you look inside the back page, I should have put it up as one of the slides. If you look inside the back page of the latest UK column, somebody sent us a piece of artwork which was on the wall of British Home Stores up in Chesterfield. And it's a cherub with a two-headed dragon. But I'm going to tell you it isn't. The cherub is actually the demon, and the two-headed dragon is the dragon that the demon takes around. And this is a demon that controls 30 hordes, legions, 30 legions in hell. That's what the occult books say. Why has it appeared on the side of British Home Stores? There's a reason for it, and I'm going to just gently push into you. There's something manifesting. It's not just a question of politics. It's not just a question of things aren't going well and it's getting a bit depressed economically. There's something creeping in with it, and it's not very nice. Always get upset when I see churches closed up. There's something particularly unpleasant about derelict churches. I didn't notice the obelisk in front, and if anybody wants to discuss that later, they can do. But if you go around Cornwall, that used to be full of chapels, the same as South Wales, they're all closed. And I think the Methodists have sold off hundreds of Methodist chapels down here. That's because they're too busy getting involved in the European agenda. If anybody wants to fight me on that subject, I'm very happy. But we do have this. And I'm sorry, but I don't think it's anything to be proud of. And I just decided I'd be a bit emotive and put it in and see what reaction we got. So the churches are closing, but the Witchcraft Museum's doing well. And Boscastle. And if you go on the website, you can do a virtual tour and you can see some of the artifacts they're so proud to display. And this is the next stage, because this is a flyer for a club which was putting on a particular event. So we've got a cross, House of the Lord, but this was nothing to do with any form of spiritual occasion. This was to do with some pretty depraved stuff in a private club. So all I'm gently going to suggest, and I assure you I'm not a prude, is that we're starting to see stuff creeping in that we wouldn't have accepted even 20 years ago. I'll ask a question. How many of you know what swingers are? Well, okay. But a lot of audiences, people don't know. People changing partners, sharing partners, and their clubs to do it that have spread up all over the country. And of course, if you're nice people, you don't like going looking at that sort of stuff. But I'm just giving a little bit of a prod here, because if you don't know what's going on, you don't know what's really attacking you. We don't know what's attacking our children. So as adults, I think there's a lot that we need to start looking at and understanding for what it is. But this is rising out of other things going on. Around the country, dock areas filled in. I don't think this is accidental. If you go up to Glasgow, you go to Liverpool, you go into Plymouth, you look around, key dock areas. We're an island, we needed those areas. They're all being filled in, so that the only foodstuffs that come into this country are coming in through three main port areas. And when we ask who's in control of those port areas, surprise, surprise, it's not British companies. And I get an uneasy feeling about this, because one way or the other, we are an island race. And that's why we're seafarers, and that's why the shipping was out there. And now we're slowly being closed in. I don't think it's accidental. I think it's a strategic plan to close down our dock areas. And this one building, but around the country, you can drive and you can see the factories closed down. Now, the government would have us believe it's because we've all become incompetent, because we're lazy, because our children don't want to work. I don't think it's that at all. I think the basic skills training has been deliberately taken away from us. It's been taken away from youngsters. So they are pumped into university education to train in being a surf instructor when there's probably only 3 jobs for surf instructors in the whole of Cornwall. So there's a con going on, and our industry, like American industry, is being sucked away overseas, whether it's India or China. And the government is facilitating it, it's not stopping it. Who's the enemy? This is when it gets bad. This man out fighting for his country, and at the time he's doing it, he can't see his children because the government's stopping him seeing his own children. So I found this guy on the internet, and he's campaigning Fathers for Justice because he's experiencing what a lot of fathers are experiencing, that they're being cut off from their children. And Mr. Cameron has been proud to boast that he thinks that there shouldn't be an automatic right for parents to see their children if they split up with their wives or partners. Well done, Mr. Cameron. He calls himself a Christian. This man was chastised for doing this and told that he shouldn't be doing it. I think he's a great man, and I'd like to say to this man, well done for doing it, because it takes a special sort of courage. Well, here we are. This is the state of the Royal Navy. So while Mr. Cameron is busy saying we should be attacking Iran, and he's warning that Argentina's getting pretty stroppy about the Falklands, the aircraft carriers that would have given any naval ships air defence, he's had scrapped. And this was Ark Royal being cut up, I think it's Ark Royal being cut up in a Turkish shipyard. And what the military people have been leaking is that with the carriers and with the Nimrods going, that within days of the government saying they were going to decommission the ships and the aircraft, teams were in wrecking all of the vital electronics that you can never replace. So if you have a warship and you want to completely disable it, you rip out all of the cabling for the communication systems and the warfare systems. This was deliberate vandalization of our armed forces, and this is absolutely true. If you are in a position of power and you fail to defend the realm or give sufficient provision to defence of the realm, you are committing treason. And I have said repeatedly on camera, and I'm very happy to keep saying it on camera, that David Cameron is a complete and utter traitor to this country, and he needs to be rounded up and brought to trial. Here we are. Here's Cornwall. And you should know this better than I do, because basically Cornish fishing has been absolutely wrecked. There's a few brave fishermen who are still out there, still taking and landing catches. But if you look at the tonnage being brought in, and you look at the number of boats operating, the fishing industry in Cornwall has been absolutely wiped out. And it's been wiped out by handing fish stocks over to other countries that have not traditionally fished the same waters. So I found it incredible to watch pictures of British wooden fishing boats being cut up with chainsaws or burnt, whilst I was still at sea watching brand new Dutch, French and Spanish boats operating. And I could not believe how we, because it was my fault as well, how we were so stupid to watch our livelihood being taken away. And of course, what is the effect? It's not just the fishermen, it's what happens at the market, it's what happens when the fish are sold, and it's all the jobs that go with the landing of those catches. So I think this is a very emotive subject. And if we're talking about Cornwall as opposed to UK, Cornwall was absolutely shafted by the move to bring us into the European fisheries policies. Crofty. Well, Crofty might have had to go because the world tin prices, when Crofty Tin Mine was struggling, the world tin prices were falling. But we ended up in the bizarre situation where Malaysian tin was being brought into Cornwall because it was cheaper to ship it from Malaysia than it was to dig it out the ground in Cornwall. And of course the government was happy to let that situation run, even though supporting Crofty, in my opinion, with a few £100,000 a year would have been a much better prospect than actually paying people on the dole. But maybe I'm using common sense, I don't know. But if you look at Cornwall at the moment, and I'm told, you can tell me whether I'm right, even the part-time jobs that used to be around for young people have gone, because either those jobs have disappeared or people who've come into the country have taken them over. I am not squeamish on this subject. So at the moment in Plymouth, we have Russians and Poles and Latvians and all sorts of people. I don't have a problem with them because they were invited into this country by my politicians. And I also know that if the dictatorship I see coming establishes itself, I will be in a prison camp with Latvians, Poles, black people, white people. So I'm not getting at the people who are in the country, I'm getting at the people who are driving the agenda, which is starting to break down national borders. Hospitals. Well, hospitals. We get call after call into the office about strange things going on at hospitals. We get nurses telling us they're working in a hospital which is chaotic. We get people telling us from the dispensaries that they're sure people are being murdered by the drug prescriptions being given to them. We have hospital consultants telling us that they're being put on NLP courses. And we have hospitals telling us that there's a eugenics program running inside where old people are being killed off. I don't think these people are making it up. I don't think they're lying. I think they're telling the truth, and there's something nasty going on. Now, when Mr. Cameron talks about changing the NHS, transforming the NHS, what he's really talking about is putting the NHS into the control of private corporations. And I can't remember the hospital, but there's now one NHS trust which is in the hands of one of the major international banks. This is not accidental. This is deliberate policy to take away what is a public service and hand it lock, stock and barrel to people who are corporatists and they're interested in making money. It's not about people's health and welfare. I don't want to preach, but this is a subject that we've got to get to grips with. I don't know whether anybody likes windmills. I spent 2 years in Holland and I quite like some of the Dutch ones, and you got little ones by some of the farms. But every time I see these things, I wince. I don't like them. And personally, I won't dwell on it, I'm yet to be convinced that these things can generate anywhere near the electricity we need. I think they're a diversion. I think they're there to keep people's minds on global warming, for those who believe in it still. And then they are nothing to do with economic benefit to Cornwall. But I can debate it. So this is where it takes us, isn't it? We've got this movement, it's going down, and now we've got the rioting on the streets. And I watched this probably like you guys did with quite amazement, until I started to hear the BBC saying that a few black guys with BlackBerry phones were orchestrating the violence across the country. And I thought somebody's telling a porky pie here. We've been working for 6.5 years trying to organise people across the country, and we've got phones and we've got email and we've got people on the streets, and we still can't do it. But these guys with a few BlackBerries. What do I believe? What are the police telling us? There were professional agitators on the streets lighting the fires. And if Mr. Redcap had stayed, he would have heard me saying at this stage, for the press to suggest that this trouble was caused by young black people is a gross insult. And I would like to see the BBC in particular brought to account, because what they were doing in my mind was trying to inflame things in the true sense of the word. Well, here they are. Now, I have a little trick here and there because I wear a suit quite a lot of the time, and I make a joke of it because I know with some audiences, if you wear a suit, people actually think what you're saying is true. If I go to Totnes and wear a suit, I'm in trouble because they automatically don't believe me. So you've got to dress for the occasion. But these people just want us to believe that they are so nice and squeaky clean. And here they are in Parliament. This man, he's a warmonger, he's a liar, he's a cheat. Here's Mr. Osborne, the Bilderberger, who was photographed having a sniff of some white powder. And now he's driving the country. This man, Mr. Clegg, very, very dangerous. Why is Mr. Clegg dangerous? Because you don't see him. He sits in the shadows. He's the one that's had a whole career working with the European Union, and he is the one at the moment driving policy through this country. So if I look at this little group, this man is the dangerous man. Yeah, he calls himself Lib Dem. There is no difference between them. And I may upset some of you in the audience because we've come to the conclusion, if you want to get to the point, how do we solve this? We've got to get people elected as individuals because they're good people who've got the necessary intellect and capacity. Under our common law, all votes in Parliament should be free votes. That's what the Constitution says. And that means that any vote in Parliament where they use whips is unlawful because it is against the Constitution. And if you go back even a few years and see how they got in policy by whipping MPs to vote the party way, you can see how they are conning all of us. So my belief, and I'm going to say it's my belief at the moment, is you want to know how to get out of this mess. Parties are not the answer. We need individuals elected to represent us. Well, this is what Tony Blair said. I'll read it because you probably can't read it at the back. The Prime Minister has a vision of a new Britain. Central to this vision is the creation of a new class, a new elite placed in positions of authority who will propagate the spirit of the age and spread the principles of the third way across Britain. He's actually telling us he's going to create a new elite. And he did it. And they don't, can I use this word? I always get told off. They don't give a shit about us. They do not give a shit. So if anybody here thinks that their local MP actually lies in bed worrying about his Cornish constituents, I don't think so. My MP certainly doesn't. My MP is a man called Gary Streeter. He's intimately involved with a Christian organisation in the Conservative Party. He seems to forget that this man took £15,000 from a Finnish Israeli arms dealer to help him get elected as leader of the Tory party. The wife of the arms dealer was the lady who ran the art exhibition in the Midlands, which had a variety of statues, all with erections, but she also had a statue of Christ with an erection. So I'd like to ask Mr. Streeter how, as a Christian, he reconciles being in a party where the leader is obviously happy for that sort of morality. These people aren't just bad, they haven't just taken a few expenses, they are absolutely rotten. And they're going to take us somewhere very nasty. How many of you have heard of this guy? One hand at the back, 2. Any more bids? 3? Any more? 4? Am I good? 4? Saul Alinsky, you need to find out about this man. If you don't know who he is, please, after tonight, get on the internet, go down to the library and research him. He was a man who aspired to destroy capitalism. And he wrote this book, Rules for Radicals. When you go inside the cover, it's dedicated to Lucifer. I'm not making that up. Get hold of a copy of the book and look at it yourself. And here is this man who is going to attack capitalism, and he dedicates his book to Lucifer. This is not an accident. And what he believed was there was no right or wrong in politics, only what was necessary to seize power. That's pretty upfront, isn't it? And he also believed that you should use subversion by infiltration of political parties and institutions, above all by the use of community organisers. He said it, not me. It's in his book, dedicated to Lucifer. I'll come back to him. So here he is, Mr. Leveson, and this is the man picked, because he's a member of the Privy Council, to start running an inquiry on whether the government should take control of the media. If this government achieves control of the media, we've got a very tough job, because they are going to close down outfits like the UK Column and the internet faster than that. And I would like to suggest the minimum that we do after tonight is start bombarding the MPs with what's really going on. They're not all bad. I was a bit unkind. One or two of them are just stupid. And if we can educate them, we might actually be able to get them to do something. Because we know that in front of the Leveson inquiry, a Lord Hunt, I think his name was, but somebody else can correct me if that's the wrong name, Lord Hunt stood in front of Leveson and said some people in the government want to control the press and media. This is Britain. I don't know a lot about the Privy Council, but I do know when I look down the list of names of people who are involved in the Privy Council that I don't like the look of them. And since it's privy, everything they're doing is behind closed doors. Now, one of the things that I can say we, the UK Column team, have learnt, but all the rest of the people from Ike to Ian Crane are also digging into this, is that what we believe is our government is not really our government. So we got a puppet show in Westminster, but behind the scenes in the Privy Council, these are the people making the decisions. We need to get these people dug out. We need to ask what they're doing, look at what they're doing, challenge what they're doing, because they're doing it too easily at the moment. How are we doing for time? Actually, I might just stop there if, where's James? Would you be happy with that? It's a bit early, a little bit early. What I'm going to do from here on is talk about Cornwall. And I found this quite an interesting exercise because when did we first meet, Jackie? I can't remember, but going back a bit, was it 2004, so 7 years ago. But before that, I was coming and doing some work in Cornwall, and I started to see things and observe things. And when I started to put this little series of slides together, all of a sudden all of that experience came back. So I'll take you on a journey of Cornwall in a minute, and we'll see whether we recognise the same country. County? Region? Which is it? Okay, we'll have a break for 20 minutes. Okay, thanks very much. So, has anybody seen this logo before? I just went looking for images on Google. This is something to do with design in Cornwall, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So I used it. This is the thing, follow the money. Always follow the money, because at the end of the money is the bankers, the banksters, as a lot of people call them. We're not talking about high street bankers as banksters. We're talking about the international derivative market people, the Soroses who are controlling billions of dollars while we got people starving. So we know who we're interested in, and don't label groups. Can I say that? Don't label groups, because this is how the other side divides us all up. You've got to judge people by what they are as an individual. And I've really had to learn this. Some people I've trusted because of what I thought they were have utterly betrayed me, and other people who I'd think, they're a bit dodgy, they've been an absolute rock. So I've had to re-look at how I relate to people, and I think it's pretty important. I will not give in to people who say that I mustn't talk to somebody because they're extreme this or extreme that. I make it my business to go and talk to these people, because if we spread the truth, we start to change the regime. I've diverted a bit there. Follow the money. Right, how many of you remember Objective 1 for Cornwall? I remember it very well because this was at the time when I was starting to, 1999, 2000, I was starting to sort of look at stuff in the Western Morning News. How many of you read the Western Morning News? Oh, okay, we'll make sure we send them a copy of the talk. But I used to read the Western Morning News, and I'd read something and I'd think that was odd, that was a bit strange. And one of the things I read in the Western Morning News was that the Bishop of Exeter, Bishop Langrish, not to be confused with Gerrish, which is a completely different name, he had hosted a debate on whether there should be an elected regional assembly. I don't know whether anybody remembers that. And I thought, this is interesting. Why is a bishop getting involved in politics? So I thought, I'll phone the bishop, and I phoned his PA and said, could I speak to the bishop? Because I'd like to ask him why he chaired this political meeting. And my goodness, was she nervous. That lady was not going to let me anywhere near the bishop, which I thought was a bit mean. So I pushed, and eventually I said, is there somebody I can talk to? And she gave me the name of another lady. And I duly called that lady and just got an answering machine. So I said my name and that I was interested in the talk about an elected regional assembly. And would somebody contact me? And quick as a flash, nothing happened. About 2 weeks later, one afternoon, a phone rang, and it was the young lady replying to that recorded message. And I said, well, look, I'm just interested, but why is the bishop getting involved in politics? Well, he's not really getting involved in politics, but obviously the church needs to be involved in what's going on in society. And so we asked the bishop whether he would chair the meeting, and he kindly agreed to do that. So then we had a discussion about elected assemblies and where they'd come from and what they were. And she was quite chatty, and I asked lots of questions. And then I said, can I ask who you are? Because I don't know who you are. Well, I'm a senior Labour Party activist. And I thought, God, that's fascinating. Why is a senior party Labour activist working alongside the Bishop of Exeter? Now, she did give me her name, but when I asked a few more questions, which were a bit penetrating about what the Regional Assembly really was, it was obvious that the conversation was over. I didn't discover who she was till much later. Do you remember a lady who said it's a good day to bury bad news? Jo Moore. The lady I spoke to on my innocent call to the Bishop of Exeter was Jo Moore. What was the Bishop of Exeter doing working with a senior Labour Party activist? I'm going to explain. So, objective one, £320 million worth of European funding came into Cornwall. And very quickly, all sorts of organisations were set up saying that Cornwall was going to be transformed. Business was going to improve, industry was going to improve, farming was going to improve, shopping was going to improve, railways were going to improve, communications were going to improve, everybody was going to be happy, and objective one was going to solve everything. Did I overstate the case? Did I? Okay. 320 million came in, and they started to advertise themselves in a very big way. So this is quite early on. Some of you might get interested in that. It depends how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go, but I'm going to say I think that's the sun. Convergence for economic transformation. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does transformation mean? Change. Well, it means a bit more than that. But here we are. We were starting to see objective one changing things in Cornwall. And then we had a body of people elected to objective one. Who were they? Who elected them? Nobody. They were appointed. So you had appointed people coming in charge of 320 million, and they started to do things. What they didn't tell you was that behind them this was going on. So it wasn't just 320 million. What they were also starting to control, they were going to act as the pipeline for European funding from the European Regional Development Fund and the European Social Fund. And this is where I began to pay attention to the Western Morning News, because the Western Morning News, if you knew where to look, started to report this stuff. And I was curious. I didn't know what it was, but I used to think, something's going on. Regions of Europe. Cornwall, a region of Europe. And here's the convergence. And the next thing that happened was that the government set up the regional development agencies all over the country. And CEDA, the South East of England Development Agency, was handling a budget of £1.8 billion. And the people on the board of CEDA, not one of them was elected. They were all appointed from the government. And suddenly you had an unelected group, only about 10 or 12 people, controlling a budget of 1.8 billion. And if you said, well, actually, who was watching these people and who was actually looking after where the money was going? Well, of course, you come to the audit office. And I'm going to say what rapidly became apparent was that the audit office wasn't doing a very good job. How many of you know about the film studio that was set up in the southwest? And then when they went to do an audit on it, it didn't actually exist. How many people went to prison for that? None. We've got people who are getting £25 a week state benefits being banged up in prison, but people involved with this were laundering huge amounts of money. Can't remember this lady's name. She's the chief executive, and of course I'm not saying she was involved in any impropriety, but when you look at what was going on here, something very nasty was happening, because the South West of England Regional Development Agency started to take over huge tracts of land where they said they were going to develop projects, and actually the projects all seemed to go to friends. It got dirty, money being sucked in, no proper accounting, fraud, corruption breeds fraud and corruption. But maybe that was accidental. And these are some of their logos here. Networks of people operating, and everything was great. Southwest Investor Guide to biotech and medtech. Do we all remember when we were told that everything in the southwest, didn't matter, we were losing fishing, didn't matter, industry was going, because the southwest was going to become the high-tech beacon of Europe. Do you remember that? I remember that. Well, it hasn't happened. And the reason it hasn't happened is because we were being sold a pack of lies.
We have broadband, Ross, so that was the only thing that...
You've got broadband.
No, yeah, we had broadband, Ross.
That's
the only thing businesses had.
right, 1 bit an hour. Yeah, okay. Right, now this is, I just thought I'd put one in, but there's quite a lot. The SWERDA came along, and of course the government office of the southwest. So we got regional government creeping in, regional development agencies, and they'd got money to spend, and therefore they needed to show that they were doing something for the money. Now I'm going to be fair and say I think that the Falmouth Maritime Museum has been quite successful. So credit where it's due. But I think it was the Daily Mail produced a double-page spread of European-funded projects across Britain, 630 of them, and it showed that most of them had only lasted 2 or 3 years, and then they'd closed because they were commercially not viable. But I'm very interested in this project, because this project started at the same time that I was setting up a project to give youngsters skills training in Plymouth called the Beagle Project. And you can believe me or not, but some of our intellectual property disappeared through the Regional Development Agency and ended up inside this building. But maybe somebody's sister was connected with it and maybe she wasn't. Absolutely. So I'm going to say over about 10 years, I got quite interested in what was going on in Cornwall, and we saw people who were totally unaccountable to anybody handling huge sums of money. And they were producing projects which were glittery, but they weren't actually producing jobs for young people in Cornwall. 320 million, where did it go? What they did is they split it into little pots. And those pots were given over to other organisations. And I am going to state there was no proper accounting. There was fraud, corruption. And what it was designed to do was establish political control. If you were working in the South West of England Regional Development Agency and you were earning £65,000 a year, you were going to keep your mouth shut, whatever was happening with the money. So these organisations, which were very showy, lots of publicity, lots of we're going to do amazing things for Cornwall, they weren't doing that at all. What they were being used for were to control people. The moment you sucked off the money, you were in the control of one of these organisations. And this is my challenge. Can anyone provide me with a copy of the full audited accounts for Objective 1? Can anybody here in this room, can anybody in Cornwall direct me to the full audited accounts which show where £320 million was spent? And my challenge to you, sir. Pardon? Well, it was mainly on feasibility studies to study the feasibility of a feasibility study. Okay? I believe, I use that word when I'm pretty confident, I believe that there are no audited accounts which show where £320 million went. And the reason they were pumping that money in was to start to break down the established government structure in the county. Now, I took this off Wikipedia, so I'm going to say to you, if you want to go away and check where I got stuff from, I looked at it, I knew it was true, so this was an easy place to go. But unitary status, they've messed up all the district councils. Change, turbulence, confusion, waste of money, because what you actually do is you replicate something that was working perfectly well before. So along came unitary status, and what I'm going to say is that it was a poison chalice, because lots of people who were involved politically in Cornwall got really excited and started to shout, we must become a unitary authority because it will give more power to the Cornish people, and it was complete rubbish. What it actually did is concentrated power in the hands of a few people. And somebody mentioned early in the talk that, of course, what disappeared was the word county. That disappeared, so it just became Cornwall Council. And actually that is a gross insult to anybody who's really Cornish, because what you have become is a Council of Europe. Yeah, this is nothing to do with a nation, this is to do with regionalisation. But these people didn't tell you. And what they're now hinting at is we've got a Lib Dem MP, Dan Rogerson. Is he in the room? I shouldn't think so. But he's was introducing in 2009 a bill which was seeking to take power from Whitehall and regional quangos and pass it to Cornwall Council. Can anybody here in the room, because I don't know the answer, can anybody tell me how many people are on the cabinet of Cornwall Council? 12. So 10 or 12 individuals now control Cornwall. 10 or 12 individuals. Because, sir... Well, I'd actually agree with that, because if I talk to councillors in Plymouth, and I can talk to Tories or Labour, what they say is it's a racket, because it's only the people who are in the cabinet who are now deciding what happens. So they have a show debate in the main council chamber on certain issues, but 90% of the policy that goes through the council is decided by the cabinet. Quick one.
The people on the cabinet aren't elected, they're put into the position by the chief executive.
Correct. Okay, we're getting there. Now, you can't read this lot, so it's only the headlines, but as Cornwall supposedly moves towards independence as a region within the European Union, income projects, cultural projects. You don't know how to have your own culture. I'm referring to you as you, not because I'm being rude, but I consider myself English. You can hiss at that. But basically, you don't know how to run your own culture, so somebody's going to tell you how to run your culture. Cornish ethnic and national identity. Well, you're not quite sure of your identity, so somebody in Europe's going to tell you whether you're Cornish or not. And then you are going to be independent as a vassal state of Europe and a region, but you're going to have international relations. I'm not making this up. When you see it with hindsight and you pull it apart, you can see that a huge scam is going on. It's a political scam, but they're doing it a little bit at a time, one bit at a time. You don't realise it's happening. You don't see it. I didn't see it. I just would say something and I'd think that's weird. But now you look back and you start to piece this together and you see that something was really nasty, but it's creeping in. And what they are doing is taking over Cornwall in a very slow, subtle way, so power is not being given to local people, it's being pulled away. And what started to happen after this process was running? Well, this is the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions of Europe. How many of you familiar with this? Well, you should be, because you're paying for it. Aren't you? You are. You're paying for it. So here is an organisation. We don't know anything about it. Mr. Alan Cadec. Oh, he's a Frenchman. That is a bit worrying. But he's dealing with European fisheries. But he must be looking after Cornwall because you've lost all your fishing industry. So here's an organisation, and it's doing something, but we don't know what it's doing. But we're paying for it. And I can assure you that inside Cornwall Council, they know what this organisation's doing because they're working, they're helping it, they're promoting it. And here's another one, marine energy in far peripheral and island communities. How long have you been a far peripheral island community? Do you wake up worrying about that? You're deprived. And this man, Tim German, that's an unfortunate name. Anybody who's German, don't take it personally. But this man is going to sort out energy in far peripheral and island communities, which includes Cornwall. And here is the clue, because it's Interreg. And if you find out about Interreg, you will see this is the European Union muscling in on anything to do with how we govern ourselves. It goes on. Here's the convergence for economic transformation. What convergence are they talking about? They're talking about making every state of Europe equally poor. That's what they were talking about. So instead of having wealthy, happy nations and poor nations, they were going to reduce us all to one uniform layer of misery, and that was convergence. Transformation. Does anybody here know what that really means? Trance. We are going to play around with your minds in order to drift you into a new world. If you think I'm joking, I am not joking. They're doing it. Building a stronger economy. Has that been achieved? No. You know it hasn't. Why is it the people in Cornwall Council haven't worked this out? Well, they have. They're lying. They're lying. And here are the funds. Now, what the funds are designed to do is breed fraud and corruption. The moment you suck on the European money, you're beholden to the European purse. And we can play here because we can say, where did they get the money from? They created it out of nothing. I'm not going to go down that one. You can go and look that up for yourselves. But we've got international bankers feeding us money which they create out of nothing, and we run around like headless chickens trying to take it. It gets deeper, because now we've got a Cornwall Development Company. Cornwall Development Company, economic development service for Cornwall Council, responsible delivering a range of economic development activities. Can anybody tell me what they've delivered? Pardon? High unemployment for all the children. So all I'm doing is looking at their adverts, if I call that an advert, and measuring reality, and you're telling me that they're not doing anything. What's their annual budget? I've no idea, but perhaps we ought to find out. And this is where we get to Cornwall Council. Who designed this logo? Well, I don't know who designed it, but I can tell you that logo gives me the creeps. I don't get a warm feeling off it. I get a slightly occult feeling off it. It's slightly unpleasant. Now, this is my opinion, and you could say my opinion's wrong, but we know that across the country, vast amounts of money are spent on logos like the Olympic logo, and when you look at it and say it's crap, there's actually a deeper meaning. So, absolutely. Here we are, mini Brussels. So these are the people making the decisions now, but most of this is show, because as we already know from somebody in the room, it's only 10 or 12 people who are making the decisions. And most people in Cornwall don't actually know who the people are making the decisions because they trust the local councillor. And the local councillors won't tell you the truth because they're earning the money they earn for being a councillor. And the ones on the council cabinet won't tell you because they earn what the local councillors earn, plus roughly £5,000 a year for every committee they sit on. So if you sit on the police committee, you get another £5,000. If you sit on the fire committee, you get another £5,000. If you sit on the child protection committee, you get another £5,000. Some of them don't turn up. So this, which is all lovely and modern and round, so everybody's being honest and truthful, is a complete lie. And what this is the regionalisation of Cornwall as a nation. I'm sorry, but you are now very close to being owned by the European Union. Except I now am fully convinced the European Union is a vassal of the international banking cartels. So we're moving into a different area. Can you tell me who these two men are, because I've forgotten? Pardon? Well, this one? Which one lives in Yorkshire? This one? And he flies in, doesn't he? Yeah, great. So obviously his carbon emission is being closely monitored. But he will be in charge of, not that we believe it, global warming and carbon emissions in yeah? Well, maybe. But there's something not right. I put this in because it's something that interested me, but like a lot of other councils, there's been debate in Cornwall over whether there should be prayers. And what we are seeing is, and maybe there people are going to get quite stroppy with me in this audience, but we're seeing people who consider themselves humanist who think that we should stop prayers within councils. But I'm not actually convinced prayers have ever hurt anybody. But they're debating it. And then the plans start. So this is a blogger who I came across who was complaining that basically there was to be a huge increase in housing into Cornwall. And I know at the moment there's a big spat going on around Truro because His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales is trying to stuff more houses in with a Waitrose supermarket, which is all pretty environmentally friendly. So we haven't got the jobs, but like a lot of other places around the country, including Devon, we're starting to see more and more houses needing to be built. And this is where it gets emotive. Why do they need more houses? Because we're taking roughly a city the size of Gloucestershire as a new population every year. This is not about the colour of people, it's to do with what is common sense. So housing targets increasing. And in the background, we've got this. So we've got this driver all the time with legislation and policy, which is not coming from Westminster, is actually coming through the European Union system. And can we prove it? Well, I just went looking for a few things. UniCreds. So this is partnerships in education are key to improving regional economies. Now, perhaps you can tell me about your universities and colleges of arts and all those things, but according to this blurb, all of these universities working in partnership across Europe are creating jobs. But they're not, are they? So somebody's telling a poor... Well, we're in debt and we're seeing massive unemployment, particularly for young people. So who is this guy and what is going on and who's driving it? We have got to get out and we've got to get politically active. And I don't mean a baseball bat, but it's amazing what happens when you pin a councillor down and you say, what is this? And you'll probably find they say, well, I don't know much about it. We need to dig it out because we've got families that can't feed themselves, and these people are swallowing up tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of public money. And then other things grow. Invest in Cornwall. How many of you have benefited from this organisation? How many of you know how much it costs to run? I'm being really naughty because I don't know either, but when I saw it, I thought, I bet they don't do anything. This is interesting for me because I watch little logos and I look at logos of organisations and I reckon I can tell whether an organisation is good or bad by its logo. I'm teasing because I hope you go and look at stuff yourself. But, well, Cornwall Wise, welfare to work, innovation, skills and employment. Wow. Is there a local paper around Penzance? What's it called? The Packet. The Packet. I bet if you look in the Packet, there's not a lot of real news, but there'll be lots of news about organisations like this, and also what school children are up to, how many plays they've had, how many sports days they've had, what they've made at school. Am I on the button or not? Yeah? So the real news is disappearing, and what you hear is Carleen Kellerman, Director of the Convergence Partnership Office. She'll be spouting. And if you check her out, maybe being unkind, you will find she's never probably done a proper job. But she's getting paid a lot. Now, I saw this and I thought, my goodness, they're going to export the whole of Cornwall. I thought, I'm going to have to tell the people in Penzance this, that they're going to be exported. I think you're going to be exported into outer space. But this is another organisation helping us, or not. Well, I had to put a windmill in again because as we drove down here, we looked at the windmills to see whether they were going round, and they weren't. And I'll tell you a story, and it's a true story. A friend of ours went to Scotland, I think it was, and he was in a hotel. And at the bar, he got talking to some guys, and they turned out to be engineers. And they were working on windmill projects. And he said they were very amusing, and they had a good old chat and a couple of beers. And they talked about the design of the windmills and capacity and everything else. And then our friend said, fairly gently, he said, what happens when it's really quiet and there's no wind? Because he said, I've heard that they back power them. And the guy said to him, well, yeah, that does happen sometimes. Whereupon a guy there who was obviously a bit more senior than the other two said, I don't think we want to talk about that anymore. What they were actually talking about was powering the windmill to give the illusion that it was turning and generating electricity. Now, if anybody here thinks I'm telling you a tall story, would you like to check it? Because it was a story picked up in a bar, and I'm going to say we believe it's true. Yes, well, if they don't burst into flames. But personally, and I looked at this a lot, I think we're being sold a pup over the windmills. Cornwall Sustainability Next Generation Broadband Networks for you, sir. Okay? Has everybody benefited from this? Well, you should have, because, of course, here's the European Development Fund and here's the convergence. It's not happened. I think you should ask for your money back. Now, I'm really embarrassed over this because this is a blue and orange building and I haven't got a clue what it was connected with. But I'm going to say to you, I look at that building and to me it's rather childish. And I don't know whether you've noticed that we're seeing architecture, that when you look at it, it looks childish. It's almost as if to make the building acceptable, it needs to be painted bright colours. And if you've seen the Life Centre in Plymouth, where we've got our Olympic swimming pool, and it's going to give life to everybody in Plymouth, it's a horrible building. It's a shed. But to make it lovely, they've painted the side panels bright yellow. I'm being really cynical here, but there's more to this than meets the eye. Community first. A public-private partnership to develop and maintain community-based primary health. How's health in Cornwall? Lady at the front's told me it's got some problems. But this organisation is working through e-portals, so it must actually be doing good. And then we come to this. So I was quite interested that the Bishop of Truro was saying, the Bishop of Truro was starting to say that there needed to be some changes in the churches. Now, one of the things which would be good to see the churches standing up to the money lenders, but they don't seem very keen in doing that. But he said we needed to discuss the future of the church. I don't know this man, maybe he's a nice guy. But I get very interested in this stuff. Now, if anybody wants to have a go at me, I'm very welcome, or wait till I've finished and you can have a go in the audience. But you see more and more churches saying we're going to work together. Now, I know that the one world government also wants to bring in a one world religion. And what I detect is that churches are being sucked together. And we're also seeing a rise of little churches that seem to have enormous amounts of money. So they arrive in a tin shed on an industrial estate, and when you say, where did the money come from, it all gets a bit funny.
Wasn't that the Rothschild shield?
Well, you could say it was an eye. I don't know how far down this we want to go. Oh, right. Well, maybe. But to me, there's something about that. And here's a Methodist one. And I can tell you that the Methodist Church runs a very nice newspaper, which if you read it, you would think it's a European political tome. And I got interested in that. I do talk to Methodists and they talk to me, but I'm just interested in what's going on. But when I see a logo like this, I wonder what's happening. Highway Church. Church vision. This is all politically correct language. DNA of highway. What does that mean? I don't know. I'm just interested. Business collaboration networks. What are these? Who set them up? Have you benefited from them? You're not giving me the answers I deserve because you're Cornish, so you must know what these things are. But we haven't got to worry because the government is looking at promoting our well-being. Do you remember this is a word that suddenly appeared about 12, 15 years ago? We talked about being well, we talked about healthy, but now we talk about well-being. This is a constructed language. But the government is now going to look after this, and Mr. Cameron talked about doing a survey to see what? To see how happy we were. And I'd love to get that form because I could fill it in. Mr. Cameron, I'd be a lot happier if you were not here. And this interested me because personally I don't have a lot of confidence in this man to look after Cornwall. I think he's got a very different agenda. And he believed he should become Prince of Europe at one stage. And I'm not sure I'm giving him permission. And this is somewhere... Pardon? Yes. Yeah. But he wants to get his Waitrose into Truro, so this is interesting. This is somewhere up in London, so it's not directly relevant, but this is another wonderful logo attached to Christianity. Every time I see logos, I see politicization of Christian things. Does anybody know what this is? Right, this is a Cornish-based theatre company. And they were running a series of plays. They are running a series of plays. All I just want to do is bring you down here. JP Morgan. Wow. JP Morgan International Bank is so keen on theatre in Cornwall that they're going to help these people run plays. Now, I'm going to have to take you into a hole, because the only reason I'm on this subject is that last week I gave a talk about the suicides in Bridgend in South Wales, of which there are over 40. And a number of people in the valleys have been helping me now for about 18 months, but 6 months in particular, and they started to get very interested in what they were called creative dance and drama. And they were seeing very nasty little plays suddenly popping up all around Wales, which were connected to the Welsh National Theatre. So when I knew I was doing this talk, I thought we'd go delving into what was happening down here in Cornwall. And I'm just going to say, with a hint of cynicism and suspicion, it's fascinating that absolutely major players in the World Banks are supporting culture development in Cornwall. Hang on. So we are looking at stuff going on here. This is Cornwall News, and this was Poole Academy, where they showed a film of a woman trying to commit suicide to very young children. And if you read on through the article, it tells you that one of the girls was really traumatized by what was shown her in the school. And I'm going to say this is not an isolated incident, because this is going on all over the country. Okay, so it's happening down here in Cornwall. This is the bit that got us interested in Wales. This is a poster. You won't see it properly because the projector can't project it well enough. It's the Village Social. It's a play. And here's a boy in black, and you can see that his face has been graffitied out. But this hasn't been done by a vandal, because the boy's got the chalk in his own hand, so he's mutilated his face. What you also can't see is that he's wet himself. And then you look at it, and he's standing in front of presumably a Christian church, but he's positioned so that he's got a what hat on his head? Ku Klux Klan, if you like. And if you don't know where the Ku Klux Klan hats come from, they come from the Spanish Inquisition. And in Spain, they still have parades at a certain time of the year where people parade through certain towns wearing blue and green and pink robes with the big spiky hat. This play is about self-mutilation. And this is in a village hall, in a rundown village where the shop is closed, the garage is closed, the post office closed, but all of a sudden £600,000 worth of money has come in from the Welsh Assembly to fund it. And the moment the £600,000 came in, there was a huge increase in horrible, dirty, grubby little plays that they showed to the young children. This is a scene from one of the plays. You can't see it, but there's a noose in the background. And the actress here, unfortunately, is severely disabled. Now, we are quite happy she's going to be an actress because we are giving opportunities, but this has specifically been targeted at young children. This is a still from a cartoon film made by 14-year-olds into the suicide of a dog. And I decided I'd take this still where the dog tried to hang himself, but he didn't succeed. So later he threw himself under a lorry. And this cartoon film, which is pretty disturbing when you watch it, was made by 14-year-old school children, helped by this company. Do you know who paid for this? You did. We did. So we got very interested in where this horrible stuff was coming from. This is some research. Suicide charity launched in Cornwall. More support in Cornwall for suicides, shotgun suicide, divorce, suicide, dad, Cornwall. We've got a nasty little suspicion that the horrible stuff we're seeing in South Wales is creeping into Cornwall. And you can find other stuff. They put, I think it was 12, but a group of under 12 children in a couple of cottages and left them to their own devices. Okay, yeah. Would you like to comment?
It was basically because they were saying that in today's society that we wrap our children up in cotton wool, and they wanted to see how they would fare without their parents being there 24 hours a day, where they're having to cook and clean and do everything for themselves. But they had chaperones. There were about 5 chaperones per each cottage. You never saw that on camera, of course. And we were about 200 yards away on CCTV all the time.
You could listen in as well.
Yeah, we could listen in on their personal mics and stuff. But, yeah.
I'm going to say very, very gently that what you were told it was about and what it was really about were 2 different things. Yeah? All I know is that when I looked into this young girl was so traumatized by what was going, she was actually at the time screaming to be let out. But they say later on it was okay because psychologists and psychiatrists and other child experts said it was okay. This was an experiment. Here's Truro, I think it's Truro. Is that Truro? Yeah. Oh, Lemon Street. From crime to fire safety, how Cornwall's Amethyst project is using data visualisation to help the council's safety partnership meet its objectives. Do you all feel safer? Phil Davies, strategic intelligence. What does that mean? I used to deal in strategic intelligence in the military. Why do we need it in Lemon Street? Well, you're laughing, but that's what they're talking about. And if you look a bit in a bit more detail, here's massive data being collected on people. Okay, this is to do with fires. What is the strategic intelligence officer? We don't know. We trust him. I don't trust him. I think he's up to something really nasty. It gets deeper because now we've got private companies going into Cornwall County Council and looking after all the revenues and benefits. So instead of a civil servant looking after your benefits, we've now got private companies. Their loyalty is to the people paying them, is not to your welfare. So something is creeping through the system, and we got the good old Cornwall Council logo. How many of you believe Cornwall should become independent? I'm happy, whatever you say. Okay, so a few, but not too many. So I thought we'd have a look at this subject. Oh, sorry. This is a blog, and there was quite a lot being said on it about the fact that Cornwall should become independent. And it says it's not that Cornwall became part of England, it's just that the English forgot Cornwall was not part of their country. I can take that. This is very interesting because this little organisation, Hope Not Hate, had a go at me recently, and they say that I'm an extreme right-wing fascist and that I hate Muslims and Islam. They're really going for me at the moment. So I'm interested that this nasty little organisation is connected with this. Why is that? How many of you have ever heard of this thing? This was created at the end of the Nazi period when the Nazis saw that if they were going to help keep Europe under control, it would be a good idea if they got in amongst all the small ethnic groups. And this policy was taken straight across into the European Union. So unknown to you, senior members of the political elite in Cornwall, I could name the names, but I think to be fair to them, I won't, were going and having meetings in Europe with these people. And what Fuan is really trying to do is everything possible to help break up the United Kingdom. So north of the border, Salmon is lying through his teeth promising the Scots independence, when all he can really offer them is a region within Europe. And this is a very dirty, nasty little organisation, and it has been working with people who have been particularly pushing for the Cornish Stannary Parliament in order to try and cause friction to break us up. You don't know about it, dig into it. Somebody warned. This is Rodney Atkinson, who on a site dedicated to this subject said, for goodness sake, watch out, because this is straight out of Nazi racial propaganda organised in the 1930s and 40s. We began with the Bilderberg group, which was connected to the Nazi movement. This is what's going on. This is absolutely what's going on. We've got the infiltration of a criminal political elite, and their objective is world government. They don't care how they get there. They don't care if they create wars. They don't care if they starve people. They don't care if they have to poison them. And just because they wear a suit, and I'm feeling embarrassed, just because they wear a suit doesn't mean to say they're not absolute killers. But what they're doing is transforming the world under a model, Gramscian fascism. Gramsci was a student of Marx, and he believed that you could break down societies, attack the history, attack the culture, attack the self-confidence of the nation. And the European Union is only one part of the whole. So we're not trying to fight the European Union, we're trying to fight the people up here that are driving all of it. That's just a reminder of who we're fighting. United Nations. In Wales are the main organisations directly bringing in United Nations one world politics into Britain. And their agenda is being broken down and pushed through little UN cells. I'm not making this up, it's true. If you look at the UN's own documentation, this happens to be for teachers, UN staff are international civil servants and answer to the United Nations alone. So we've got cells set up in Britain, predominance in Wales, who are pushing in one world government propaganda and documentation and ideology, and they tell you they're accountable to themselves. Who is president of the UN, the United Nations Association UK? There's a Mars Bar Prize for the right answer. David Cameron. David Cameron. So there is something really big and really nasty. I used to believe we were fighting the European Union. We are not. The European Union is a subset of something much bigger and nastier. And if you look at where the UN gets its power from, we're back to the banks. Here's Gramsci. He was an Italian. But his ideology is closely linked to this man, Saul Alinsky. And I want you to remember Saul Alinsky. If you don't remember anything else from this talk and you go home, Saul Alinsky. Bedtime whiskey, Saul Alinsky. Cup of tea in the morning, Saul Alinsky. Here's his book, Pick the Target, Freeze It, Personalize It, Polarize It. What's it all about? Psychopolitics, the art and science of asserting and maintaining dominion over the thoughts and loyalties. Psychopolitics to produce a maximum of chaos in the culture of the enemy. I'm being military now because I'm giving you a brief. We are being attacked. And we are being attacked in a very dirty, dangerous, subversive way. It's real. And it's now got to the point where we're beginning to feel the country getting destabilised. This was the head of secret police for Stalin. He was an absolute sadist and a psychopath, but very intelligent. And he used to enjoy getting involved in personal torture. If you stand up and dare to expose what these people are doing, they tell you that defamation is the best weapon. Continual, constant degradation of national leaders, institutions, practices. And that's what's going on in the press. And if I go to Plymouth, we've got the Evening Herald. Their headlines are never good. It's never about what's been achieved in Plymouth. It's about death, drugs, drunks, cheats, benefit cheats. And I reckon it's the same in the press down here. This is an attack. So this was the attack on me. Student activist diary exposes fascist meeting in Swansea. That's what you're in now. Yeah? Where did you go last night? I went to see Brian Gerrish. We went to a right-wing extremist fascist meeting. Brilliant, isn't it? And here's the man accusing me, Zahid Raja, and he's National Union of Students Wales black student officer. And he says that Brian Gerrish is a known fascist sympathiser. He's a well-known proponent of fascism to speak on 4 issues that underpin Islamophobic propaganda. He wasn't with me when I gave the talk in Birmingham Central Mosque. I have an open invitation to speak in the mosque. I'm going back to speak in the mosque, and I'm currently helping a very brave Muslim gentleman who's exposed some horrible stuff going on with children. His reward by the Christian people around him is to lose his job and be threatened and bullied and victimised. But this man, who won't speak to me on the phone because he's also a coward, of course, says that I'm a fascist. The state is getting very frightened of what I'm saying because we are telling the truth. Here is good old Gramsci. And Alinsky is using the same tactics, but this is what they deal in: gradualism, infiltration, dialectic process, problem, reaction, solution. Transformational Marxism. When you know where to go, you see where all the words in the blurb come from. It's not an accident. But look at this. What they said is that they had to weaken Christianity, because until they got rid of Christianity, you couldn't get the ideology in. Why? Keep it simple. If you believe that you have to tell the truth, it's pretty difficult to corrupt you. But if you get rid of rules which say you need to tell the truth and behave yourself and have morals, these people can get in. And by 1985, they judged that Christianity was so weak that they started Common Purpose. Proof. According to the coalition government, community organisers will play a big role in big society. The Office of the Civil Society has stated that the policy is based on the principles of Saul Alinsky. This is the Tory party telling you they are working to Marxist ideology. I haven't made it up. Cameron, Osborne, Haig and the rest of them aren't Tories at all. They're Marxists. Gramscian Marxists, which is pretty close to fascist. It's in the middle. And who created this mess? The bankers, the same people that funded Marx. So if anybody says, well, where was the proof from Brian Gerrish? Here is the Tory party document recommending Saul Alinsky, who is a Marxist, subversive. And here's David Miliband. He's going to change the Labour Party. He wants Labour activists, the philosophy of political action theorised by the American activist Saul Alinsky. Your MP is a lying toad. Or stupid. We'll say he's stupid. Is it him or her? Both. They honestly... Sorry, we're both male. Well, that's allowed as well, actually. Right. How many of you have heard of ectogenesis? You should do, because Cambridge University is now pushing that we're not only investigating test tube babies, we're investigating children brought up through the whole embryo to baby outside of the mother. Ectogenesis. Now, stay with me because we're getting to critical stuff here. Sorry. Subversive change agents, future gov disruptors. Have you heard of this lot? This is real. Here he is, Dominic Campbell. He did 8 years at Barnet Council in London. And here's his Facebook page, I think, or Twitter, I can't remember what. He's a director at Future Gov. He works in the government and the military. Well, that's interesting. And he's into change management and social technology. Great. And this is his number 2, called Carrie Bishop. I haven't made this up. This is her blog. She calls herself a nerd. I'm a nerd, nosy Parker, interested in social change and trainers. I'm a director at Future Gov. I'm into all kinds of new stuff and I'm big on listening. Sounds like a bright young lady. Okay? You're laughing. I'd guess she's paid 45 grand a year. And this is what they're into.
I'm going to do that very uncool TED thing of saying, this is really exciting for me to do this. You don't often hear that at the beginning of TED videos, but I think you should a bit more. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the work that we do. My name's Dominic Campbell. I run a small firm called FutureGov, and I'm lucky enough to work with a small gang of cool people who are really interested in how we can use technology and the web to transform government and politics. This is my personal story. This is where I started 9 years ago. Very, very classic local government story. That's Barnet Town Hall in North London. Doesn't look like the hotbed of innovation and disruption. So this is also me. The other side of my life is my web obsession, and in particular Twitter. And the last two slides are really the foundation of my career and the foundation of FutureGov, and also me being lucky enough to be part of this movement that's now often called Gov 2.0, Government 2.0, building on how do you transform the web government using Web 2.0 technologies. So Twitter has been pretty fundamental to why I'm here tonight in so many ways, which I can't really go into because there's so many of them, but it's fascinating just from a personal journey how disruptive to my life this disruptive technology has been to actually take me out of being in the back office of a town hall in North London to suddenly being here 3 years later is phenomenal. What is the kind of culture that we're all striving for? What is the new world that we're pushing for? So I think that we're at a point now where you're either with us or you're against us. Or are we actually going to transform government into something entirely different? I think the really crucial thing is that we're pushing from two sides. So on the one hand, we need to be disrupting from the inside of government. They're the ones who are creating parallel structures. Carrie Bishop, who I'm honoured to work with, who's a great colleague, she talks about parallel structures where you're not destroying the system with this technology, you're just creating an entirely new system. Just using the web to create new structures for yourself. So normally where there's bright colours and shiny logos like these, you've normally stumbled into a place where social innovators are trying to do something new and creative and interesting. And all I will say to finish is just to encourage you to join us now as a militant optimist, get on the web, get creative and get going. So thank you very much.
Right, we didn't add anything to that video, it was just cut so that it emphasised what he said. He says we need more disruptors on the inside. So the lady's gone here, but the lady was talking about trouble in the hospital. The trouble in the hospital is coming because there's disruptors in the hospital causing trouble because under some of Alinsky's doctrine, if you want change, you have to create a state of turbulence. If you've got a nice organisation, it's all working smoothly, everybody knows their job, and you want to change it from one state to another, you've got to get it turbulent. So this man says that we're going to get disruptors in. He's using the word. And then he says, you're either with us or you're against us. And then he said at the end, militant optimist. Militant disruptors. These people are really dangerous, and they've been trained to do what they're doing. Now, I'm watching the time. I'm going to speed up because I want to give you time for questions. Are you still with me for a bit? Yeah? Okay. Who is training these people? Well, Common Purpose, I can't give you 2 hours on Common Purpose, but Common Purpose is a political charity that's doing stuff with people's heads. And in Cornwall, Common Purpose until recently had an office inside Cornwall County Council. You were paying for them to have an office inside the council, and the council was spending tens of thousands of pounds putting people on Common Purpose courses to become future leaders. What we've discovered is that everywhere you come across Common Purpose people is fraud and corruption and lies. And I now regard these people as victims, whereas before I regarded them as something rather nasty. They're victims because somebody's played with their heads. The policeman attacking that car as if it was a wild animal, they've had their heads done. Sorry, if you go on the website, there's a lot of documentation. It's being updated, but you can read the documents and you can see how much people are spending on Common Purpose training. It's a charity, but it works politically. This is an internal document from Common Purpose when it says that they're not allowed to use the word program anymore. They've got to talk courses. Why is that? I'm going to put my hand up because they suddenly realised we were looking in saying you're messing with people's heads. So they told all their internal people they could only deal in courses. And then they said there'll no longer be any elements of leading beyond authority. Well, that's amazing because Julia Middleton's written a book on leading beyond authority. You imagine what happens when a policeman starts to lead beyond his authority. That's what's happening on the streets. It's high level. So this is 2 cabinet documents put together. We asked for information about Common Purpose training people at very high level in the government. First of all, they said in the minutes they were running workshops with the top 200 and the Common Purpose model was proposed. And then later, when we got the truth, Common Purpose model, Helen Ghosh and David Bell. Well, David Bell is the chair of trustees of Common Purpose. So he was in the meeting at which his charity was being given the contract. That's insider dealing. Julia Middleton made this statement in 2007. How did she know there was going to be a coalition? Doesn't this mean deviousness, cunning? Why does the government need people who are devious and cunning? Because everything going on in government is a lie. And what they need is people who've had their heads rearranged to continue the lie. This is what Julia Middleton says in her book, Beyond Authority. These are not my words, they're hers. We're warlike and bad at feedback. We take tinned food abroad. The Dutch take their potted flowers. I've been on holiday with them. 5th columnists. Karl Marx, German bankers are great people. So the woman running the training for our top 200 civil servants believes in Karl Marx, and she also thinks the East German bankers are great people. And what do they do with dissent? Run over, undermine, discredit, bully. Was that what the police were doing to that man in his car? Shame and embarrass people who are in the way, harass and wear them down. Use people. This is not charitable language, this is Marxist doctrine. And this woman is training the top 200 civil servants. A bit of expenditure, because we can always prove where the training is, so we deal in documents. And in the early days, can I show the scale of it? Well, this is taken out of Hansard, so this is a government record. You can't read it, but that's what it says. "15 cities, we're going to get common purpose training. Since 1989, Common Purpose has established programs in 15 cities. 5 more are due to become operational by early 1992. Who approved this political charity? Cornwall County Council did, Devon County Council, Plymouth City Council. Nobody told us that it was Marxist. And what they're really using is this. Now, I am not saying that this company is doing anything wrong or illegal or bad. I'm using it as an example that this is a neuro-linguistic consultancy. And they're giving people doses of NLP because it can empower them, make them happy, achieve their dream over the rainbow, become good at work, seduce women. You check it, go on the American NLP websites and see what they're saying you can do. And here is another NLP organisation training the police service. Training the police in NLP. Here's Cressida Dick. She's head of terrorism now in UK. She's so trained on common purpose ideology, she's off her head, in my opinion. Sorry, Cressida. Do you remember in the paper there was a police officer who wouldn't get on his bike for a photo because he said, I haven't done the bike safety course? It's true. I think it was the Daily Mail, and everybody laughed and said, that's madness. In his head, it wasn't madness, because he believed he couldn't get on his bike because he hadn't done the course. And this was a lady who'd been with a police officer, a partner for 17 years. She said her police husband did a diversity course and he had a complete personality change. Sorry, as a repeat. This appeared in the USA. It was an advert. This is an advert using NLP. It's designed to make you ill because it screws your head up. JP Morgan. Oh dear, same people that's funding the art and drama in Cornwall. Right, in schools, creative visualization, show and tell, circle time, meditation, project caressing. It's okay for older people to stroke you. Diversity training, empowerment, reframing, anti-bullying, no winners at sports day, no conkers, bright and gifted programs, youth parliaments, debating a view the child does not hold, designed to make you mentally ill. Designed to make you mentally ill. Creative dance and drama, visioning, World Food Days, role swapping, filmmaking, suicide, early and explicit sex education. We've got university reports that say if you give early and very explicit sex education, you can increase the suicide rate in young children. That was done by a university. Dark reading material, children being asked to reveal personal things about their family, on-site child services. How would you feel if your father committed murder? That was an essay topic set for children. I know, because it was me, and that was back in the very late 60s. I'm just over 40 now. You can play around with that. Okay, so this is stuff going on in schools. I'm going to say very nicely, because it sounds arrogant, you don't understand what it is. You need to find out, because it's not nice.
Sorry, that didn't all sound negative to me, all that's up there.
It won't sound negative to you.
No, it doesn't sound negative.
No. I'm not going to push this too hard, because in some schools, some of the things like circle time are used for a positive effect. I will give you that. But what I will say is that in amongst this is something very nasty, right? I'll just give you a little bit. Where does a lot of educational documentation come from? Exeter University. Exeter University is the specialist European university in the occult and Satanism and witchcraft. And J.K. Rowling's very proud of her study there. I'm getting on to a slightly different level here. But I just say, do your own research and be suspicious. This is the key. At 1% risk, 1 child in 100 has a problem from cognitive type stuff like NLP. So at 1% risk, every 100,000 children, you're going to see 1,000 children with problems. In the Welsh valleys, they're hanging themselves. Yes. because you're up against a regime that actually wants to take us to a very nasty place. Depressed. I believe that they've done an experiment in South Wales to take people to such a low level they want to see whether they can trigger suicide. Experts in NLP say to me the trouble is that if any of the children have got underlying mental problems, when you give them this type of training, the risk increases dramatically. Are they going to world government? Yes, because this is the United Kingdom Parliament and this is the group working towards world government. They can't run the country, they can't run Cornwall, they can't run no, I won't say the local harbour because the harbour master, delete that from the thing. They can't run the country, but basically they're working on world government. And some people saw through this crap. So here's the quote: when the people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there's liberty. This is very powerful stuff. Simple. This is important too. Okay? We can deal with this, but you can't fight it till you see it. The moment you see it, you can fight it. The fear factor is learning. I think this man is the most disgusting politician. I used to think Blair was bad. But Blair, you knew he was rotten. This man is cruising on an image that he's a nice man. He's rotten. I believe he's a traitor. I believe he knows absolutely all the things I'm talking about. And he wants to bring this country to its knees. And he needs to appear in prison. Needs to appear in a court. And in my opinion, he needs to be tried and he needs to be punished. He doesn't like me very much. And we know that at fairly high level in the Tory party, they said that when they got into power, they were going to legislate against people like us, the UK column. And we think this is partly what Leveson is about. Right, what can we do? It's knowledge. The first thing is knowledge. When you understand how you're being attacked, if you're feeling ill and you discover somebody's poisoning you, you stop taking what's poisoning you. We're being poisoned. What do we need to do? We need to get people talking. Now, this appeared on a Daily Mail website. I'll read it very quickly. Lawful rebellion can provide the solution. You saw what happened in Wall Street and you saw what happened in the City of London. Multiply that by 500 or 1,000 times and we will be free of Europe, free of party politics, and we can institute true democracy, I think, by having a chamber of independents who will govern by consensus. We shall divorce ourselves from the banking cabal that's attempting to run the whole world with a single government. We need to rebuild military industry and have a national bank that issues interest-free money instead of engineered collapses. We need to recommence trade with the free world and put on trial all those traitors that have deliberately got us into this sorry state. There are millions of good people in this country and perhaps no more than 50,000 whose common purpose has been to destroy the sovereign nation. We did not write that and we still don't know who did, but we like this person because that was up for several days on the Daily Mail site. These are the people, us, that's going to sort it out. If you don't know, in Birkenhead, 600 people on the streets. They arrested a judge under common law. I can tell you that there was no violence the whole day. People were walking around smiling and laughing and talking to the police, educating them. So this is absolutely lawful. The judge never went into court again, and he's since retired. Yeah? None of this was reported by the BBC or any of the mainstream media. 600 people on the streets, 40-odd police cars, dog handlers. The whole thing was there, never appeared on national news. This is what Saul Alinsky says. Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. The government is now getting very frightened of us because it knows we are beginning to understand. So I'm not going to read all this. Alinsky is a bad man because he's attacking us, but his tactics are brilliant. What we've got to do is get truth back in everywhere. Who's going to solve the problem in the police force? Who's going to clean the courts up? People in the court service. Who's going to turn the NHS around? People in the NHS. Most people are good, but at the moment they don't understand how they're being attacked. This, we've got to have a little bit of caution on, because we believe that there are people like Soros behind the Occupy movement and the Anonymous. Okay, you can check it. Maybe I'm wrong, but we have been to talk with people who've been doing the Occupy movement. We went to see them at St Paul's. We've been talking to them in Plymouth. We get on with them well, but we're saying you need to look at another level, because they go for the bankers, but they don't see the detail of what's being done. So lawful rebellion is what's going to get us out, mixing, talking, encouraging, spreading the truth. We're not losing, we're just starting to win, and I can tell you every message we're getting now, the vibes, is the politicians are beginning to get very scared. So keep calm and carry on. Thanks very much.